Hi, welcome to Cubs in Culture for January 12th, 2018. Today I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that annoy me about sort of baseball culture, specifically about the way in which statistical analysis using batting average or on base percentage or fielding percentage or zone ratings, range rating, WAR, OPS, WOMBUS, all these perceived velocity, all these different statistical measures that are kind of inflecting the game, or WHIP or ERA or however you want to say it. There's a shit ton of data in baseball, and there's a shit ton of statistical analysis. Now, I've been using statistical analysis. I use ERA or FIP, which is fielding independent pitching, or WHIPs, which is walks, hits, innings pitched, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'll use WAR, which is wins above replacements, as a shorthand. So yes, I'm also guilty of this sort of hypocritical thing. It's just that so much of baseball is about this sort of thing that to even begin to have sort of a conversation with it about baseball, you just sort of naturally go there. And I kind of want to make this episode about sort of my love-hate relationship with statistical analysis, because statistical analysis helps us at the same time sort of experience the sport as... So we can have conversations about whether or not you should be playing Jake Arrieta $100 million. Okay, there's a moral question about whether or not anyone should get $100 million for playing a sport. Setting that aside, just in terms of whether or not the value on his play on the field is worth X amount of money. If you grant that if you set aside the political moral questions, just in terms of if these wins are, if a win costs X amount of dollars, is Jake Arrieta providing that amount of wins? Okay. So there's that. So there's also a tendency, again, and this is something in Cubs culture, that Theo Epstein's very much a data-driven, very sabermetrically inclined individual, and he still uses the Cubs still use a hell of a lot of predictive analytics. But one of the things that's interesting about Epstein is when he got the Red Sox their World Series, he when he first became the GM, he was asked how he was going to win the World Series, and he went on record saying he wanted to say by getting people who got on base more, which is a very sort of cybermetric answer, that it's not that the only thing that matters, or the only thing that about players, is their statistical production. How they show up statistically through batting, on base, whatever sort of statistics you want to look at. Nothing else really matters about them. What's interesting is he then built the Cubs, and he's gone on record saying that he started to stress character first and started to focus more on sort of the soft skills of baseball. Let me pause for a second. Okay, and then sort of the other sort of thing is Joe Maddon. He's famous for basically two things. One is very much a data-driven sabermetric thing, which is when he was an Angel. He was an Angel for 31 years. So there's this thing in baseball where you have a spray chart, which is basically tendencies of certain batters to hit the ball to the left or the right or whatever. So he one day was doing spray charts for someone, and he noticed that, I think it was from Griffey Jr., that if he moved the shortstop 3 feet to the left or something like that, Griffey Jr. was more likely to hit it. And they did that in spring training, and it worked. And then with the Rays, he really took this concept of defensive shifting, moving people around according to what the batter spray chart said they were likely to hit. Now, so that's sort of the first thing. And then the other sort of thing he's famous for, Joe Maddon, is, of course, theme trips and being a fun manager with very great people skills. So one of the things that's interesting about the defensive shifting, which is sort of the defining characteristic of this era, is we're not sure if it works probabilistically. Because there's always this sort of question of if you're a batter and you see someone move 3 feet to the left, whether or not because you think you're going to hit, they think you're going to hit it 3 feet to the left, so you're then thinking you're going to hit it 3 feet to the left. So one of the brilliant things about Joe Maddon is he realized that defensive shifting with the Rays, that there was probabilistic tendencies for it, but it's also a psychological thing, that by shifting more dramatically, you're also psychologically encouraging the person. So the Rays for a long time were a team that went through defensive shiftings the most. The Cubs are actually the least defensive shifted team now because the psychological effect has gone away. But the thing is, that notion of psychology, or the soft thing about what the person is thinking, statistical analysis doesn't get into that, and some sabermeticians are absolutely hostile to sort of the soft tendencies, that the only sort of value a player puts on the field is what shows up in the statistics. Okay, so let me begin with a very simple question. That's Baez, because I'm using him as my example. You can ask the question, how is he as a player? And I could answer, well, he hit 864 OPS last year. Or I could say he was worth 2.9 WAR. Okay? Or he hit 273 with 21 home runs, or whatever. Okay? Or I could say, well, he's an error-prone spark plug. Both of those, all the answers I gave there are true, true, or some way insightful, or another sort of way about Baez is he's young, he's hyper. Likewise, if I'm talking about Wilson Contreras, how is he as a catcher? And I could say, like I've said in the past, that, well, he's actually not a very good pitch framer. Or I could say, well, he's really excited to be on the field, so he's bouncing around all the time, and sometimes he causes his pitchers to lose strikes. Okay? It amounts to sort of the same thing, just saying it in a different way. Excuse me, the cat's being a pain. Okay. So how is the person as a player? Or I could say, how was John Lackey as a pitcher? And I could say, well, he's won 150 games, or whatever his statistics are. Or I could say he's very, very angry. Okay? So for my sort of perspective, what matters to me is stats are a necessary evil, that you use them as little as possible to get your point across. And what really matters about players is the psychology of the game. It's annoying. Statistical analysis is annoying to me because it's sort of the least interesting part of the game or the sport, but it's also the one that shows up the more. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about, because in my next section I'm going to bitch about these statistics. There's something called WAR, which is wins above replacement, which is an attempt to measure in wins the total value of a player. So his offense and his defense adjusted for position, etc., his base running, etc., etc., etc. And then there's another version of it that's called JWAR, which is the average contribution of his WAR over his most prime years. It's a way of which trying to normalize for Hall of Fame players. Okay, so WAR is supposed to be an overall value of a player versus and JWAR is supposed to be like, is this person Hall of Fame worthy? Okay, so there's that. Then the other one that's a big one I'm going to complain about, or how it tends to be used today, it's this thing called the leverage index, which is basically a real-time measurement of win probability about what's happening on the game. So when the game starts, the win probability for each team is roughly 50%. The home team has a slight structural advantage because of the walk-off possibility 9 innings later. And the chance of a team winning eventually becomes 100% at the end. But as games play out, the probability changes depending on the score, what's happening. So in the first inning, if the bases get loaded up, and the top of the first and the bases gets loaded up, that increases the team's chance of winning more so than 3 straight outs. Okay, so the win probability, the leverage index, is the win probability changing across the game. And if you look at this, it actually generates a graph, and it somewhat tracks to the momentum swings, or how the chance of the game, how each team winning changes. Okay, so it tracks the chance of each team winning and how it changes over the course of the game. That's what it's actually measuring, and we know win probability based off of thousands upon thousands of games playing out in a certain way. So if you get 9 runs in the first inning by a team, the chance of a team coming back is very, very low. It has happened. The Cubs almost did it last year, but it's extremely low. So it's derived from decades worth of games and how they played out. But so it measures how the momentum, or how the teams are changing the win chance as the game goes on. Let me pause there.